All right, so here we are. It's September 4th today, I believe. So this is like the end of the growing season, summer update of my corn and soybean plots here. This right here is actually a plot I did not get, well, I got some footage, but I never ended up uploading a video of planting this plot. I probably could have, but there was so many other videos to edit and get out. And this is the area I had the like 12-foot tall silage corn here last year. It was super thick. I double planted it, and then a December windstorm ended up like stalk snapping a lot of it and made a big rat's nest. And so I put like 3 bags of fertilizer on this plot because I figured that corn probably sucked a lot of nutrients out of the ground. I put beans on this half, and then the other half where there's a little bit of corn over there, that's where there was beans last year. This is a pretty wet ground field too. Like I said in my other soybean videos, a lot of our soils here have the iron chlorosis issue where the beans turn yellow like shortly after planting. And for some reason, this field does not, and it's just as low as some of the other fields, but it does have tile. It has tile in it from like way back when. It must still be working because it never really floods out as bad in this field after rain as some of our other wetter fields that don't have tile. And like I said, these beans never really turn yellow, and it usually ends up looking pretty good. There's a few weeds out there, but not too bad. I'll pick off a plant here and compare this with my soybeans in another plot and my soybeans in a different plot. And then I'll pick off, maybe not here, but I got a corn plot over there. I'll pick off a couple ears and compare them to other spots too. I'll pick off a random plant right here. Let's count this up. These are probably some of my best looking beans on the whole farm this year. You can see all the old corn thatch in here from last year. We did not plow this spot. All I did was disc it up multiple times and then plant it with the planter. So on this half where the silage corn was last year, there still is a ton of chaff in here and debris. But see, these beans are still trying to put on new pods right here. These are planted a little bit later. I can't remember the exact date. I'll put it up on the screen. But you can see like right here's one of them. If you can see that right there, it's got like 2 stems. You can almost see the original stem right here. Yeah. This is the original stem that got nipped off by a deer. And then it shot up these 2 stems. Like I said, almost every plant in here got nipped off right away. And it really set it back early on, but they did recover and bounce back pretty nicely. Or I should say really nicely. All right, so these piles right here, each have 20 pods. I got 6 of these piles, so we got 120 plus 11 over here. So 131 pods on that one plant. I have no idea what that would yield. But not every plant in there had that many. There was some smaller plants. I could probably pick one off. I'd probably only find like 50 of them on certain plants in there. So you could probably drop the average down to probably, I don't know, anywhere between probably 60 to 90 pods per plant. That's pretty good. I have no idea what it would yield. Like I said, that was a pretty big plant with a lot of room to grow, pretty thick stem. But I saw some plants in there with even more pods probably. I want to quick show you these beans before I move on. This is a kind of a failed plot. I didn't really have a video of this either. This right here is all volunteer corn because I had corn here last year and the deer didn't eat much of it. I actually had to thin it out because in certain areas it was coming in so thick it wouldn't have produced anything, but you can see there's ears on there. I mean, look at this stuff. That's like 6 feet up right there. There's some pretty big ears in there because it's thick enough where it was able to pollinate, but not too thick where it was going to choke itself out. And then I got beans on the edge right here. It was kind of a failed plot because of all the weeds that came in, but it looked better about midsummer. There wasn't quite, the weeds weren't quite as bad, but these beans are a little further along. The pods are a little bit more filled in. I'm sure this plant right here I'm looking at, this probably has at least 60 to 80 pods right there. Anyways, I'll take you up to this cornfield next. Just remember, 131 pods on this plot. This is just close to the road right here. These are a lot of the deer that are coming from the north that eat on these plots. Anyways, yeah, I'll take you to this corn plot right up here next. This right here is just a long, narrow half-acre plot. It's pretty cool because the first 4 rows on this plot, right where I'm standing, these first 4 rows, this was cultivated only. We had this whole field set up on 38 inches because we were planning on cultivating the whole thing. And the first 4 to 5 rows I did not spray. The rest of the field I did spray once to get, you know, to clean up the weeds inside the rows where the cultivator is not going to weed out, like right where the corn plants are. So you get in here and take a look. So all this grass, a little bit of broadleaf and water hemp in here. Right where I'm standing, this is cultivated only, organic, no spray on this corn, on this ground right here. And then you get in a little bit more, like right about here, you can see where it really starts to clean up. A lot less grasses, still some broadleafs in here. These are probably all broadleafs that survived the glyphosate spraying, but I mean, the corn looks about the same here compared to where we just were in size. I mean, this really came in good this year. You can see how thick. It's like the perfect spacing. I mean, these ears are literally touching each other. I mean, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 plants right there in like a little section there. We got 2 more here. And very little coon damage in this field or any of my fields this year for corn. So I'm really happy with that. We're gonna probably have some corn left over at this point because it's looking really good. It's just starting to dry down now. This is that 85-day variety. Maybe a little bit on the small side for ears. I could pick off a couple in here and take a quick average, but I just want to quick show you. So this is the 85-day corn. And you can see right here where it switches. This is the silage corn. You can see this stuff is probably a couple, maybe 1 to 2 feet taller. And this silage corn has thicker leaves compared to the field corn, and more leaves. So it gets way, way better weed control. When you get in here and look at this, you can already tell it's just that much darker in here. And greener because it stays green a little bit longer. It's a little slower. This is like 100 and something day maturity corn. You can see this stuff still has some moisture in it. Hasn't really dried down. Oh, and I should mention that this field had no fertilizer whatsoever. Now, it did have a good dose of fertilizer last year. I had this end planted into beans. And these are some of my best looking beans last year. They had like 80 to 90 pods per plant. That far end down there, that was all pumpkins that we grow and sell. And I remember I fertilized at least 3, maybe even 4 bags. For sure 3 bags on this half acre. And this year, I didn't get a chance to buy fertilizer before we planted this. And we just planted it without fertilizer. So what you're seeing is grown with no fertilizer. Now I did have beans on this end, so we get a little bit of free nitrogen from that. But with phosphorus, potassium, nothing extra this year. And you can see the weed control on this silage corn section is much better. I mean, very little weeds in here and a lot less light getting in. And then you get over to this field corn spot. These plants are shorter, they got less leaves, letting in a lot more sunlight. I'm ending up with a lot more broadleaf weeds in here, dropping tons of seed. So it's looking good though. This was all cultivated 2 or 3 times, so I'll pick off like maybe 3 of the field corn and 3 of the silage corn, and we'll compare the difference. And then I'll pick off some ears somewhere else and compare that to this field as well. So back into that cultivated only section, and there definitely is more weeds in here. That one spot I just walked in down there, the corn was a little bit taller. The weeds weren't quite as bad in that section, but for some reason the corn gets a little bit shorter in this sunny spot right here. There's definitely more weeds and a lot of grass in here. These ears, I'd say on average, are definitely a little smaller. The whole plant is shorter. The ears are smaller in this cultivated only, no spray section. Then you go over a little bit. I mean, look at all this grass. I mean, it worked. It was just a kind of a nice, cool experiment. I got plenty of ground here to experiment with stuff, and you can see these ears are definitely smaller competing with the weeds. And then you get into here where it was sprayed. It just looks much cleaner, a lot more ears, a lot more size to them. So definitely a difference, that's for sure. Definitely smaller. So I'm gonna go count and measure up these ears quick and then move on to the next plot. All right, on the right we have the silage corn. You can see this stuff hasn't quite dented yet, and there's just definitely more moisture in here. Field corn's drying down pretty quick already, all dented. And what I've noticed on the silage corn the last 2 years of growing it, like I said, it gets taller and shades out weeds better, but it tends to have this tip dieback. Like it doesn't really, you know, grow corn all the way to the tip. And you get some funky looking ears like this once in a while, but this side's fine. And the field corn just does a little bit better job, you know, pollinating all the way out to the tip. This one had some dieback on the tip, but yeah, these are a little smaller than what I've grown in the past. But I think it was planted a little bit thicker than what I've had in the past too, which is good because I'm getting more plants per acre, probably a slightly higher yield. But if I break one of these in half here and count, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. They're probably all close to 16 around. See the difference there? Maybe a slightly smaller kernels on the silage corn. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 16 as well on the silage corn here. So I tried to pick a big one, a medium-sized one, and a smaller one. So we'll compare, we'll pick some corn out in the next couple plots and we'll compare it to this plot, I guess. I got some silage corn and field corn planted out further in different plots as well. So this right here is the 1.2 acre Field of Dreams. I got probably an acre of beans in here and a little bit of brassicas on the other side of those trees. This is that wetter end where we have iron chlorosis issues where the beans turn yellow. They eventually recover from it once they get to a certain stage about knee high, but by that time they've been slowed down so much that the weeds have caught up. This is like the weediest section of this field and the slowest bean growth section as well. So obviously it didn't turn out that good. There's a lot of weeds in here. Next year, probably do 2 years of corn right here because I just cannot get beans to grow that good here. And I think in the future I'm just gonna do corn and brassicas on this spot because whenever I plant beans, it just turns into a weedy mess like this. And then this side of the field, it starts to get drier. And up there's a few less weeds, as you can tell. The beans are much taller and have probably a lot more pods. I'm gonna pick off a bean plant from somewhere in here. I'll pick off a bean plant from somewhere up there and we'll compare, you know, and we'll compare to the last plot as well. You can see these plants still kind of have that yellowish look to the leaves. They never really fully recovered from the iron chlorosis. And these weeds in here are just ginormous. I'll pick off one of these ones right here. This looks like a pretty good one. I mean, there's a couple of pretty good ones in here, even though there's all these weeds in here. That's a good amount when you look at it, really. I did fertilize this plot a good amount this year. I can't remember the total. I think I had like maybe 4, 5 bags on this 1 acre. So that one actually does look pretty good, but you look in here, there is some smaller plants as well. Like this plant right here. Like what the heck is that doing, you know? Must have just been getting crowded by this bigger bean plant right here. But yeah, this is pretty weedy. Almost a complete failure in some of those other spots right up there. It's really bad. You can see some of these beans are actually starting to turn a little bit yellow up on this drier end. And you can see there's like no deer browse on any of these beans anywhere in this plot because the neighbor's field is all beans over there. And there's another field of beans that way. And the only time the deer really nipped on our beans was a little bit in the beginning because they were actually a little bit bigger than the neighbors. They no-tilled that field and this was a tilled field. My beans got a little bit faster start and they were pretty much ahead the most of the growing season. That's why these are turning yellow. That field hasn't really started turning. And after that field caught up, kind of, they just didn't eat on any of my beans, which is good. I don't want them eating on them in the summertime. I want them eating on them in the winter. I'll pick off one right up in here somewhere. They look pretty big right here. Here we go. That's a pretty good one. You can see how branched out this is. This was a broadcasted bean field. I got some thicker spots, and if you plant beans too thick, they're only going to end up like, I could probably find one right here. Like right here's a little bit thicker section. Like here's one that really didn't amount to much. This is one plant. You can see the roots down here. He's growing right next to a couple other plants. Like here's another one. When you plant beans thicker, they end up, you get more plants per acre, but they end up looking like this. Just one stem. But when they get a little bit more room to grow and they're planted a little bit thinner, the majority of this field looks like this. This is like really well branched out. It's got like 4 main shoots with lots of beans on it. So it's basically like 3 to 4 plants all in one. You can see all the nodulation on the roots down here. This isn't even close to all the roots. It's snapped off right here. Those roots probably went a lot deeper than that. See all the nodulation and the free nitrogen that it'll be releasing back into the ground. So, all right, so I'm in like some of the weediest stuff down here on this corner. You can see these beans are really yellow from the iron chlorosis still. Well, I wouldn't say really yellow, but they're still showing symptoms of it all the way to the end of the growing season. And you can see these plants just don't have nearly the size of stems. If I pull one of these out, I mean, look at that. It's probably like 30 pods on there. I mean, look how yellow these are right here. Let me pluck one of these off. Try to find an okay one. Yeah, that's a pretty average one down here, I'd say. We'll compare this to that first one. That first one I plucked off was right up near the beginning of the weeds, kind of closer to that drier section. That's why that one looked pretty good still. But down here, you can see it's definitely not as good. More weeds. Beans are more yellow. So here we are. This is after counting up all these pods. This is the small plant that I picked off last in that really weedy section. This guy just barely had 41 pods. These are 40 pod piles right here. And these 3 piles are 40 pod piles. So you can see these 2 other plants have like literally 3 times or more the type of the production. So 41 pods on this small plant. And a lot of his pods are like 2 pods per plant, 2 seeds per plant. And they're just smaller pods overall. Really struggling in that really weedy iron chlorosis spot. This right here is the first plant I picked off right in the beginning of the weeds, right in the beginning of the field here. And believe it or not, that one actually did the best. He's got 40 here, 40 here, and 40 here, plus 24 over here. So it's 144 pods on this plant. And then the second plant I picked off over in that drier section, he's got 135. There's 15 here. Those are 40 pod piles. He's got 135, but probably a little thicker stem than that first one I picked off. But anyways, the first and second plant I picked off right here in the beginning and over in the drier section performed pretty much the same. 135, 144. I'm sure there's a plant out there somewhere that's probably 160, 180. That would be like a plant with like nothing around it, just filling in for the extra space. I could have picked some thicker ones up in the drier section, and those ones would have been probably close to 40 as well. So it's all relative to how much space you give these plants. This is all broadcasted, so like I said, there's some thinner and thicker spots. And obviously in the thinner spots, they're going to be bigger plants with more pods per plant. So it's just kind of a rough comparison here. But yeah, in that weedy spot with the iron chlorosis issues where they turn yellow, I think I'm going to be done planting beans there, because it's just, this is like one of the better ones on that far end where I was looking. Right when I first came into the plot and picked that one, they were looking pretty good around there. That's why that's this one. But anyways, we'll head over to the next couple bigger cornfields and we'll compare some more corn. I got a little bit more beans out there to show you too. So here we are out to the swampy wet field. This is my biggest corn planting. Probably close to an acre, that side and that side combined. This right here is a complete failure of soybeans. This is all broadcasted. Again, this area really struggles with the iron chlorosis. You can see this is even worse than the last field. These beans are still yellow. I'm not even gonna pick one of these off to really count up or anything, because it's again probably only like close to like 20 to 30 pods per plant. But when you look in here, I mean, there is pods in here. Just the weeds are super hard to control in this field. I had, this is all cultivated corn over here and cultivated corn over here, and this was broadcasted beans, so I couldn't cultivate the beans here. All I could do was spray it, and a lot of this stuff is pretty resistant to the spray, so it didn't really kill much. Brassicas here look fantastic. I'll take a quick look over here at this corn. This is later planted corn. It was probably early June when we planted it, so that's why it's a little bit greener. This is all the 85-day corn. This stuff hasn't started drying down yet because it's planted later, and it being a wetter field, this stuff never shriveled up once. We had one dry stretch back in like early July or something, and you can see this corn is noticeably taller than that 85-day corn in the first field I showed you. Just simply having more moisture in this black ground here. And these cobs look bigger, and they're not even done filling out yet. I can feel they're probably, I'll pick a few of these off and we'll compare. But yeah, this is looking really nice. I believe I put, again, close to only like maybe 3 bags of fertilizer, the 9-23-31. No extra nitrogen at all. Just the day we planted the 9-23-31, broadcasted 3 bags on this 1 acre, and it's doing fine. I'll pick off 2 or 3 ears in here and we'll compare. And right up here, this was the corn that was planted at like 38-inch rows and 30-inch rows, because I was going to try and just spray this. And I tried to squeeze in a few extra rows in here, and that was kind of a mistake, because that last section of corn right down there, that was all 38-inch rows. I was able to cultivate that 3 times and really keep the weeds down. But I was only able to get through this stuff 2 times. And that 3rd cultivation pass is what really did it, because in here we noticeably have a lot more weeds. Not a ton more. The corn looks fine, but I really like having weed-free fields. And this definitely has a little bit more weeds in here, but the corn is looking really good. And then in a few areas up here, I actually have some extra thick corn. That would be right here where I'm at right now. You can see the 2 rows right here, how close they are. There's a row here and a row right here. There's a good look at it. You can see the 2 rows kinda. And then like a 30-inch row here and a 30-inch row over there. Just a tight double row in here, and it's thick but not too thick where it's gonna reduce production, because these ears in here look just as good as any of the ears down there by the 38-inch rows. Maybe slightly smaller, but not much smaller at all. But the only nice thing about having these 38-inch rows is I can cultivate down the weeds, because these are all Roundup resistant weeds, and the weeds aren't resistant to iron, that's for sure. Cultivator will just pretty much rip out and kill 99% of the weeds when I run through here. These are all weeds that have, like right here's one that survived probably, this bigger one. And these smaller ones all in here are all weeds that grew up since I last cultivated. And like I said, this section over here I was not able to get down on the third pass when the corn was just starting to canopy over, probably close to knee to thigh high. But yeah, it's looking pretty good. I got this other field right up here is all corn and soybean strips. So right behind me is the field we were just in, about 1 acre corn split up into 2 sections. Then directly right next to it is another 1 acre field. This one's half beans, half corn. Got 3 strips of soybeans and 3 strips of corn. That first strip of corn is all silage corn right there. Then this strip of corn and that strip of corn over there is the field corn. This corn was planted probably 2 to 3 weeks, probably 3 weeks before this corn. And this had 3, maybe just 2 cultivation passes on it. This is all 38-inch row corn up here. It's a little bit drier field. And not nearly it's got totally different types of weeds. I mean, look at whatever this weed is here, this white cockerel or something. This is, there wasn't any of this down there in that wet field. That wet field was all water hemp and giant ragweed. And then these drier fields, definitely less weed pressure in here. I mean, look at how nice this is. You see the corn's a little bit further along, drying down a little faster, planted earlier. But there was weeds in here because these soybean sections, I had to come in here and hand pull. There was water hemp plants here and there scattered throughout this. I pretty much saved this from turning into a big weedy mess. There's some fresh deer crap right there, but I'll put up some before and after pictures of what some of these bean strips looked like before I pulled the weeds and after. You can actually see a couple of my weed piles right out here. Big weed pile right here. Another big weed pile right here. And this is probably the worst section of soybeans in this field where I'm standing right now. They're kind of yellow from the iron chlorosis and they're pretty patchy. Those other bean strips over there I'll take you to next. I'll pluck off a few plants over there and we'll compare them. Those are a little bit better. But I just want to quick dive in to this silage corn right here. Bunch of weeds I threw to the edge right here too. And man, this silage corn, I think it usually gets planted a little bit thicker. The seeds are a little smaller and we use the same plates as we do with that corn. And it always gets planted a little bit thicker, which is fine. That's probably another reason why these ears end up a little bit smaller, because it's planted a little bit too thick probably. But look at the weed control in here, man. It's like nothing. And the stuff's a lot greener yet because it's a little bit longer maturing corn. But I mean, these ears are literally all touching each other. They're so thick in here. I mean, we got like 1, 2, 3, it's like 5 there, 6, 7, 8. There's like 7 ears like in a 3-foot area, 3-foot row. So yeah, I'm really happy with how all my corn has looked this year. This is a really nice big one right here. Wow. But you can see that's why it looks so big, because look at how much thinner it is here. Got a little bit thinner plants, got a little bit bigger ears. When you turn around, got thicker plants, a lot more plants, a little bit smaller ears. But this is all looking relatively nice. I mean, it's amazing when you look up. There's like virtually no sunlight getting down in here. And look at this. Just beautiful, weed-free. A little bit of coon damage down there. That's what these stalks are that are down. Not too bad on coon damage yet, but this silage corn, man, does a really nice job of shading everything out. So here we are on the second strip of beans now. These beans are a little bit better, as you can tell. And there's definitely a little bit more deer browse on these beans compared to the first 2 areas of beans I was at. But still not a crazy amount of browse where it's going to limit their production. And this was not broadcasted. This was drilled, double planted at roughly 15 to 20 inch rows. I just went back and forth with the same planter, the same corn planter. So you can see there's some gaps in here. So some of these beans, these bean plants,
You know, I really loaded, like, look at this. This is like 2 plants right here, and there's like probably easily 200 pods right there. I mean, look at how loaded that is. They're not that tall because they're getting browsed down a little bit, but they sure are full of pods. I mean, look at this. There is 2 plants right there, not just one. But yeah, I'll try to find one of these pretty loaded up pods, loaded up plants in here, and then I'll pick off one that's kind of an average plant too. Like right here, this looks pretty good for average seeding rate. This is pretty good canopy closure. A good amount of plants in here. They're a little bit smaller. So yeah, I'll pick off like this one right here. Pretty good, but definitely there's some more in here with more pods. And this is pretty cool. Down here on this end, you can really see this right here is the potassium deficiency. The yellowing on the outside of the leaves, but dark green in the middle. And for some reason, it was just on this edge right here. This whole field right here, I think I put like, there was nothing put on the day we disked it up and planted it. I put on, I believe it was just 1 bag of fertilizer, the 92331. And I think I just put it on the beans. I maybe put a little, I basically speed walked up and down this field with my broadcast seeder and put a very light amount on right before rain. And that was when the beans and corn were up a little bit, already a few inches tall. And this is the only section that's showing this potassium deficiency down here on the edge of this field, where I probably did not fertilize that much because, you know, I would have just thrown it onto the grass right here. But you get in a little bit and you don't see any of that deficiency. Some of this yellowing is from the beans, you know, maturing like that right there. Probably some of that. But like you can see some of this stuff where it's just yellow along the edges. That's a potassium deficiency right there. But these things still look pretty darn nice. I'll pick off one of these big ones in here somewhere and compare it to that average one I just picked off. Well, here's the corn comparison. This right here is from the wetter field that was planted a little bit later. You can see that, you know, they're not quite as dried down as much, maybe just starting to dent a little bit. There's definitely more moisture in these being planted a little bit later. This is a little smaller one. I guess I probably should have picked off a little smaller one in the dry ground field where these two came from. But you can see the size difference. I mean, this one probably is a little bit bigger, you can say. A little longer than the drier ground field. That wet ground field looks to be planted probably about the same, maybe slightly thicker than the dry ground field. Should be close to the same population though. Same planter, same seed, everything. We'll count what's on here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 on these ones. I'm sure that this one's probably close to 16 as well, like the first field. $16 is on this one too. So both the dry ground and the wet ground field grew on average 16 around, about the same size. Yeah, so the corn's looking good. I'll get the beans up here and I'll count off all the pods. So here we are. This is the average bean in that pretty much the average population throughout the plot. And then here's the bean plant in a little bit thinner spot in the plot where we had a little bit more room to grow. Well, here we are. This right here is the first bean plant I picked off in that kind of more of the average population spot in the field. And he's got 40 here and 40 here and an extra 5 right here. So an 85 total pods on this plant, which is still pretty good, considering he was in a pretty average population spot in that field. And it was, you know, pretty decently thick around him. But this other plant, man, did he produce. He was in definitely a thinner spot. He had plants on one side and a lot of sunlight and a big gap on one side. So he had extra room to grow. You can see how big his stem was. And I mean, we got 40, 40, 40, 40, 40, and 23. So a total of 223 pods on this one plant, which is definitely the most I've ever counted on any of my bean plants I've ever picked off. I know last year I had like 140 and 160 on some of them. I even had like 140 something on one of the ones in the last field. The first field was, I think around the 120s. That was a later planted field that was all nipped off by the deer. This right here was the first beans planted on the property here, and it's definitely showing it that early planted beans, if they're not screwed with by the deer, do produce higher. I'd say the average for this field's got to be close to the 130s per plant, which is really good. There's a lot of thin gaps in there, but those plants just make up for that gap by just putting on more pods and really closing the canopy on those wider rows. And beans in wide rows, man, they do just as good as the beans in thicker rows. You just got to give them time to canopy over, and you got to have good weed control on those wider rows. So I think really pulling those weeds really helped produce an extra couple bushels in that plot for sure, because it was really getting bad there on some of them ends. Yeah, don't want to make this an hour-long video, but I got a little drone video coming up after this, and I'll probably have an update of these plots sometime in probably, I don't know when, maybe December sometime, but I'll do drone footage then too. And yeah, it's looking really good. This is probably by far the most food we've ever had on the property. I know I said that last year, because last year was the first year I planted this whole 1.2 acre wet field right here. Like I said, that corn was a little bit thinner last year than this corn, and last year we didn't have any corn up in that next drier field. It was all beans and late planted beans. This year we had beans planted in the correct time and half that's in the corn. So I mean, we got more food than we need. So yeah, thanks for watching. Drone video's up next.
When this began, I had nothing to say, and I'd get lost in the nothingness inside of me. I was confused, and I let it all out to find that I'm not the only person with these things in mind. But all the vacancy the words revealed is the only real thing that I've got left to feel. Just stuck, hollow and alone, and the fault is my own, and the fault is my own. I wanna heal, I wanna feel what I thought was never real. I wanna let go of the pain I felt so long. Erase all the pain till it's gone. I wanna heal, I wanna feel like I'm close to something real. I wanna find something I wanted all along, somewhere I belong. And I've got nothing to say, I can't believe I didn't fall right down on my face. I was confused, looking everywhere, only to find that it's not the way I had imagined it all in my mind. So what do I have but negativity? Cause I can't justify the way everyone is looking at me. Nothing to gain, hollow and alone, and the fall